Welcome to Game Over Montreal. It was a game. We'll say that. The Canadians owe Sam Montembeault a couple drinks, I believe, after the first period tonight, holding them in that one. Yeah, the Columbus Blue Jackets are not great. Let's be real. Neither are the Montreal Canadiens, but Canadians triumphed in this one despite many mistakes. Ian Boisvert is here, our most frequent guest from last year, finally makes his triumphant return with a win, a W. And hey, the Canadians have half of their regulation wins this season in the last 3 games. I guess that means they're hot right now. How do you feel, Ian?
Things are good, man. I think for a while the vibes were kind of off on this team. I think, it's funny. They went out to California and they took two of three, and I think fans were still kind of upset with how they did it. Like,
Yeah,
like
I mean, they played terrible against San Jose at
sure.
the very least.
Yeah. And like the LA game, I was like, LA's just a better team. Like
Yeah.
that's a team that's built to grind you and wear you down. This is the kind of game that's more their speed. They should beat Columbus more often than not, which they have recently.
Yeah. I mean, I think people were really down after that LA game. Probably more due to the play recently than the actual game. I think it's probably very lucky that the Canadians have only been shut out once so far this season. Uh, but I think LA is outside of maybe Vegas, the team that the current construction of the Canadians match up the worst against in the entire league. I think it's those teams that play that high structure game that are big and physical and wear you down and just don't make mistakes. The Canadians really don't have much against those teams right now. It's a
Right.
struggle. So in this one where they made a lot of mistakes and were able to recover from it. And, I'd say even into the second period where they were playing significantly better, the mistakes were still there. Exiting the zone is a chore, but they managed to continue to kind of roll with the punches and didn't get sidetracked by that second Columbus goal where they had already taken control of the game. And, one mistake, or I guess a series of mistakes all at the same time,
Yeah.
leads to a deficit. And they fought back and won it. So I guess in a lot of ways, this one, despite it not being like a high tempo game per se, was kind of symbolic of this team when it's mostly on its game.
Yeah, and I think you're right, especially, the way that they match up with other teams. Teams like LA and Vegas are so incredibly deep. Like you can't hide anybody in those games. So like every weakness the Canadians have in those kinds of games are magnified because, you know, they are rolling out Pierre-Luc Dubois as a third line center. Like there's not many teams in the league who can do that, and there's not a ton of teams in this league who are going to be able to play well against that. The I think the Blue Jackets are kind of a contemporary for the Canadians as far as the where their two franchises are at the moment. Although I don't think Columbus meant to be as bad as they are. I think they really thought they were going to be better, which is, it's kind of I think they're kind of a cautionary tale for how you build a hockey team, right? Like they thought, okay, we've got Fantilli and we just got Gaudreau, and then they screwed around and did that whole Babcock thing over the summer. And now they're just kind of like it seems like a lost year for them, and we're not even at December yet. Like I kind of feel like that that rebuild has gone off the rails a little bit.
Yeah, I think they're a weird team because I think they have a lot of veterans that fit into the same kind of categories that the Canadians currently, right? A lot of good players for the middle of your lineup, but I mean, I know that he's not scoring at a rapid rate this year so far. Coming up, I want to do a deep dive on him, but Cole Caulfield, they don't really have a Cole Caulfield,
Sure.
right? And Adam Fantilli will be better than anybody currently on the Canadians, but
Sure.
right now, he's not an immediate superstar in the NHL, which is the case for almost every 18-year-old who makes the NHL. He's a very good player, but not quite there yet. And yeah, I think the weird thing about the Jackets is it's almost like there's two teams, right? There's their young players and then there's their like close to prime age players, and there's this separation and they haven't filled the gap yet. Like
Yeah.
It's a weird team. And yeah, a cautionary tale for sure. I feel like Detroit is another cautionary tale
Yeah.
because Detroit's been rebuilding for how long now? And I know everyone thinks Steve Yzerman is a genius and he did great work in Tampa Bay. But I look at the Detroit Red Wings and they need the same things as the Montreal Canadiens need. Like maybe you could say that Larkin is a higher uh, end player than Suzuki right now, but he's a little bit older as well.
Yeah.
Is Lucas Raymond a superstar? No. Is Moritz Seider that much beyond like Caden Gooley? I don't think so. You know, like their top end guys are not that great either. So there's a lot of rebuilds across the NHL that aren't hitting the high points yet. So I think people need to remember that there is a possibility that this thing doesn't work out, right? Like we can
Sure.
see examples right now where things don't work out. So the paranoia that Habs fans have is understandable, but also we can't control it.
Right. Yeah, I mean it's you can look at like half the teams that are rebuilding in the Eastern Conference, they've been rebuilding for a decade.
Yep.
Like I look at Ottawa, like we're looking at them, the rebuild was supposed to be over 2 years ago and they're last in the Eastern Conference. Like it's just not a the rebuilds aren't this, unless you grab a McDavid or you grab, someone of that caliber, and even those teams aren't great. And I know Kent Hughes has been saying I think he's just finding people on the street to tell them like they have McDavid and Draisaitl and it's not working. See, like it just seems like every day we get a new quote on those lines. Um, but like I look at the teams in the East like the Detroits and like the Buffaloes, and they have a head start. And yet like those teams still don't really seem to be figuring it out any better. Detroit definitely, but I think Detroit is also just kind of I think they're just scoring more, and that's going to solve a lot of their problems. Like DeBrincat was a good ad for Detroit, but I don't know that he should be as much of a difference maker for a team like that than he has been already. Um,
Yeah.
I think-
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think the thing about Detroit is like for how much further along they are on their rebuild, you would think they would be a better team overall. And they're like, let's see here, they're 25th in the NHL in overall expected goals for percentage, like 2 points ahead of Montreal. That's that's just not great.
Yeah, and they just added Patrick Kane for some reason. He's coming off of
Yeah,
that hip resurfacing surgery that like nobody ever comes back from particularly well. So like it's just I don't know, it just seems like a recipe for disaster. At least they didn't sign Kane for any kind of term. It's really just a 1 year, let's see what you have left. I think he's out of gas, but we'll have to see how that plays out.
yeah, it's a weird one. I think that's the weirdest thing about that Detroit rebuild is it seems very scattershot. But hey, you know what? We're gonna have coming up here, I believe, as Mark takes over next week because my parents are in town. They're gonna come have an early Christmas with my kids. We're gonna have Prashanth, Iyer Prashanth, or Prashanth Iyer, sorry, on the show for the Detroit Red Wings game on Saturday, December 2nd. So we'll go a deep dive into Detroit's rebuild and contrast it with the Canadiens rebuild if you're interested in doing that. The story of the game tonight, I feel like we can talk about it pretty openly. It was messy. It was
Yeah.
extremely sloppy. And the biggest thing that you and I kind of chatted about before we started the show was exits and entries. They were not clean. They were very messy. I think exits were worse than entries, but man, oh man. I know everyone was all over Caden Gooley tonight. He deserves some of that criticism, absolutely. He was fighting the puck, especially in the first period. But the turnover that resulted in the 2-1 goal for Columbus, as much as Caden Gooley kind of made a panic, just smack the puck out of here move, watch the forwards on that play, and it is pretty consistent right now. Is it seems like everybody's getting ahead of themselves. They want to score goals. They're feeling the pinch of that shutout loss, maybe, and they're flying the zone way too early. There's very little puck support. And the one time in that period, or the start of it anyway, when they did have puck support down low, it was Uri Slavkovsky with that really nice pass up to Christian Dvorak, who had to fight for it to get in on 2-on-1 with Cole Coffield and ended up scoring a goal. So, like, I I wonder, I don't know where you sit, Ian, but I think they've got to kind of sit these guys down and say, like, listen, we know you want to score goals. You know what's one of the best ways to score goals is support your teammates.
Yeah, it's to have the puck when you leave your own zone. Like it's sort of like I'll compare it to other sports. Like in football, you'll see a receiver go out for a catch, and you'll already see in their mind that they're 2 steps ahead, and they've already got the ball in their mind, and they're running upfield. And then all of a sudden, you realize they don't have the ball at all, and they've dropped it. Like that's sort of what it feels like. Is these forwards are springing the zone because they're like, our guys got it, we're fine, we're gonna make it. And then those forwards get up to, you know, they get up to center ice and they turn around and the puck they're trying to get the puck back in their own zone. There was a lot of tough reads with that respect in this game. Like the first Columbus goal, Monahan is in a puck battle on the wall in the Columbus zone, but it's like just inside the blue line. And Lidstrom sees that and he goes, I'm gonna go off for a change. And he goes off the ice, and as the second he turns to go off the ice, he loses the puck. So it's
Yeah.
just like timing is a big part of all of this. But I think, this team's defense core is not good enough at getting the puck out on their own for the forwards to be able to do that. There might come a point, in this team's rebuild where we've got a lot of defensemen coming who are going to be pretty good at moving the puck out, that maybe you can afford to leave the zone super early. That's not this team. Like with
Yeah, not
Justin
yet.
Barron back on defense, you can't be doing that.
Yeah, and hey, Barron had a good night tonight, I think. He was
Yeah,
one of the guys who didn't really make many bad plays with the puck. I don't was he was one of the ones caught watching on the line A goal, but again, he was
he
in
jumped
my
on for
mind,
Lidstrom.
right. In my mind, I think he was the least guilty of the three defensemen involved in that play.
Right.
Like Matheson was just full on not paying attention, and then him and Barron both got caught flat-footed, which I don't know how you both get caught flat-footed, but come on, guys, you got to pay a
Yeah.
little bit more attention. The attention to detail in the first period, especially, was frankly just not there. There was some good sequences, but a lot of just like putting the puck around the boards in the offensive zone. You've got possession, but you're not accomplishing much. And then in the D zone, so many turnovers, and they cleaned it up as the game went on. I will say that they did clean it up, not to an elite level or anything, but
Mhm.
overall, much better second and third period for the Montreal Canadiens, and an earned win in my mind, which, when you're playing a bad team, when you're also a rebuilding team, you kind of want to get those wins. You want to show that things are going well for you. And another good game for Uri Slavkovsky as well.
Yeah. That line was interesting because I think Dvorak frustrates a lot of Canadians fans, and tonight I think I figured out why he bothers me a little bit, especially when they're in the offensive zone. He makes a lot of hope plays where he's not really looking. He knows that a player's in an area and he just goes, I'm gonna throw it in that area. And a lot of times that kills whatever rush they're on, kills whatever zone pressure they're putting on, to the point where, on that 2-on-1, he does the smart, simple thing, which is to just shoot the puck. And, a lot of people would say, oh, he fired it right at his chest. Sure, but you know what he didn't do? He didn't fly by the net afterwards. He stuck right in front of the net and knocked the puck over to Cole Coffield
Yeah.
instead of forcing that pass to Coffield that both him and Slavkovsky have both been guilty of this year, where they're just trying to get the puck to Cole because he's the one who scores. So, like, I feel like if Dvorak simplifies his game, that line can really because I'm starting to see more chemistry between Coffield and Slavkovsky. They're getting the puck to one another a little bit better. I think if Dvorak really simplifies his offensive game, that line can really start to go.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there was one play you're talking about Dvorak making a lot of hope plays, but I think what also frustrates me about him is sometimes he does the right action, but isn't prepared to get the puck. So I know that I don't remember who hit him with the pass, whether it was Slavkovsky or Caulfield, but there was a play in the second period, I want to say, where Dvorak takes a good route. He goes right to the net, but his stick's in the air, and the puck kind of like goes right into his feet, and he's not like they put him in a perfect position to score.
Right.
So maybe it is a case of just like, hey, put your stick on the ice, go to the net, and things will happen for you. His job in the offensive zone is pretty simple because those two guys, as you mentioned, have developed a lot of chemistry. There was that shift that Caulfield and
Yeah.
Slavkovsky had in the third period where they just were on the ice for like 2 straight minutes, dogging the Gaudreau line.
Yeah.
That was fantastic, and Dvorak was. I'm not trying to trash him because I do think that he has played well this season, significantly better than last season and the
Sure.
season before, but he wasn't very involved
Yeah.
in that sequence. It
He
was
was
kind
third
of,
wheeling.
yeah, he was very much third wheeling. Like some of the time he was high in the zone supporting the D, and I was like, good job, Dvorak. You go where is necessary, buddy.
Yeah.
He wasn't making any bad plays, so I'm not,
No.
I'm being mean, but still.
I think I remember that shift you're talking about because I think the next line that came out was the Monahan Anderson Armia line. And
Yes.
the second Anderson got the puck, it was going back the other way.
Yep.
Like I was like, man, I just feel bad for the guy at this point. Like everything's going so well, he steps on the ice and it immediately stops going well. Which a lot of that sure is the way that he plays, fine. There's not a player in the league that has had less luck than Josh Anderson this year. Like even when he was doing things well, it wasn't working out for him. So when he doesn't play to that, you know, one full expected goal, zero actual goals kind of effort. Like it just kind of he kind of just floats. There's not really much for him to do out there.
Yeah, it is frustrating, and it's sad to see Anderson. I know that I was reading Kay's timeline as the game was going on, and she was saying like she doesn't even look when Josh Anderson has the puck in shooting position anymore. She just closes her eyes because she knows what the result is going to be. And
Yeah.
as sad as it is, that is kind of how I'm feeling as well. It's like he gets the puck in a good position, and I'm like, well, this isn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So eventually he'll figure it off, but well, you know, or figure it out. I don't know what I'm talking about. My diction is all over the place tonight. All right, I do want to do a bit of a deep dive on Cole Coffield tonight, but before I do, I got to remind everybody to like the stream because we've got Romelli in here commenting that there's over 100 people watching and only 10 likes so far. I can't see the like count, but smash that like button, subscribe to SDPN. Please share the link for the show. Hey, share it right now on Twitter, on Facebook, on Threads, on Blue Sky. I don't care, whichever one your favorite one is. Instagram, TikTok, whatever. It helps us. It grows the show, and we get more people in here that we get to converse with and take your questions and have an interactive, fun show talking about your favorite team, the Montreal Canadiens. Everyone who matters' favorite team. Uh, Sebastian Jackson says it sucks when what does that say? When Josh Anderson gets dealt, he's going to go on an 11-game heater. Yeah, I hope so for his sake and
Yeah.
whoever trades for him. He's not a terrible goal scorer, right? Like we know this isn't him. It's the fact that the goal scoring isn't there combined with everything else that is him that's very frustrating.
Yeah.
All right, Cole Caulfield, Ian, how are you feeling about him so far this year?
The goals haven't been there to the extent that we thought they would be, but like it hasn't stopped him from one, finding the score sheet and two, having an impact on games. Like he's still, I mean, is outside of maybe Nick Suzuki, is there a more impactful Canadians forward than him on a night in, night out basis? I just don't see it. Like I think that he's still him even when him and Suzuki aren't on the same line, which they haven't been for quite some time. They are still like he's still one of the most impactful players the Canadians ice on a nightly basis. I'm not worried about the goal scoring. It is what it is. Like goal scoring across the league, like even the guys who do it the best, it's still a streaky thing, right? Like even if in a season where you're expecting him to score 50 goals, that's at least 32 games where he doesn't score. So like, you know what I mean? Like there's room for him to have games where the puck doesn't go in. It's fine. And also just across the team, the puck's not going in as much, right? Like it's just sort of I think some of it is just a byproduct of, you know, the skill level of the rest of this team. And like luck plays an incredible factor in all of this. The Vancouver Canucks seem to have all the luck in Canada right now, and it doesn't seem like anybody else is allowed to have any.
It's like Space Jam. They're like the Monstars. They stole
Yeah.
everybody's mojo, right? And it is strange, right? I mean, if you compare Caulfield this year to Caulfield last year, like the most immediate thing that you should notice is that all the differentials are up, right? Despite the lack of goal scoring. Expected goals for percentage is up, Corsi's up, unblocked shot attempts up, shots on goal, differential is up, goal differential is up. But the goals have been in a much more low event space. less goals for, less goals against. But if you actually go in on the details, what's crazy I find about Cole Coffield this year is last year, trying to get the rates here at Evolving Hockey because I had it open before, but it closed on me. Uh, in terms of shots per 60 minutes, he's increased by a shot per 60 minute. He's got 2 extra shot attempts per 60 minutes happening right now, and he was already like top 10 in the
Sure.
NHL in these categories. Expected goals per 60 also up. But what's down is and also expected Fenwick shooting percentage. So like your expected conversion on unblocked shots also up this year. However, shooting percentage, this is all before this game and hasn't been updated yet. Last year, his individual shooting percentage, 16.46%. This year, 7.5%. His shooting percentage on unblocked shots last year was 11.4%. This year, 5.4%. So if and those numbers were pretty stable last year and the year before under St. Louis. I do believe his true talent shooting percentage is probably in and around 15 to 16%. If Coffield was shooting like that this season, he'd already be at about 13 or 14 goals,
Wow.
which is about double what he's done so far this year. I don't think anybody would be complaining. Now, I do think that this lack of goal scoring that's come at the same time as incredibly improved defensive play at tonight's first period where he had 3 turnovers in his own zone notwithstanding.
Get rid of
Overall,
that.
ignore that, just throw out that evidence. Don't look at that, don't look at the
Yeah,
man behind the
don't
mirror.
Google it.
But like overall this season through 22 games, the defensive play is just night and day with last year. He's gone from one of the worst defensive impacts in the league to being at or around average, which is really massive, especially with being separated from Suzuki for like half the season, right? So I think you look at that and you look at coming off of shoulder surgery and you can say, like maybe the shooting hasn't been as perfect as the year before, even if he's getting the chances, like the execution is not there. But if he's doing the right things, that execution is going to hit.
Yeah.
And I have zero doubt. Like, give me the odds on Coffield hitting 40 goals this year. I'm still taking it. I'm still taking the over. It's going to happen.
Yeah, that regression is gonna hit so hard in like the most hilarious way. Like he's gonna go on a heater where in like a span of 3 weeks he might have 15 goals. Like it's gonna be one of those sort of regressions to the mean where, oh yeah, he's actually one of the better shooting talents in the league. And right now he's a volume shooter. Like he's shooting the puck a ton. He should have a whole lot more. The Canadiens power play not being as effective. And I know like the raw numbers have looked okay for the Canadiens power play this season, but the goals that they score don't feel like traditional power play goals in the sense that they're not on like set plays. A lot of them are on the rush, like because like it's the only way they can score is by coming back into the zone when they finally are able to do so. Um, I think yeah, I think there's more to his game right now than scoring, which if you told me that a year ago, I don't know that I would have believed it.
Right?
And if his defensive play is average, I think that and the scoring picks up to the place that we expect it to. Like that's an outstanding line that you can put on the ice at any given time. We're not expecting him to be so defensively sound he wins a Selkie, right? Like he just needs to not bleed scoring chances the other way. Um, which he's, again, first period notwithstanding, he's been able to do with or without Nick Suzuki, which is, a lot of people are saying that, Nick Suzuki was kind of saving that defensive performance. But I mean, he's playing with Dvorak, who's, yes, I think more defensively responsible than Cole Coffield is, but Coffield is making a lot better plays defensively than we were used to.
Yeah, I don't know if I would call Dvorak defensively responsible. His last 2 years have been pretty rough.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I know he's the center, so maybe he's more positionally responsible, but overall, I've been surprised at how involved in like breakouts and, puck battles Caulfield has been. You know what's the weirdest stat with Cole Caulfield? He has more than doubled his hits per 60 this year. And he did it again tonight where he saw Johnny Gaudreau coming up And he was like, you know what? You're not going to hit me. I've got the puck and I'm going to knock you down anyway. He's taken his moments this year against guys in his size range to like be a bully, and I
Yeah.
kind of love it.
Yeah, two things on that play. One, that was the only time I noticed Johnny Gaudreau that entire game. Like that was a like it's kind of insane the drop off with him has like it's been night and day from what we saw when he was in Calgary. And two, like was that the smallest collision in NHL history? It has to be up there. Like unless like
No,
Nathan
there
Gerby
was
hit David
who
Desharnais, like that's the only one I could think of.
who's the kid on Washington that's like 150 pounds? Coffield laid a reverse hit on him earlier this year, and I think that was the
Oh,
smallest hit of the year.
Matthew Phillips, is that the one? He was in Calgary
That's the
last year.
one.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. He's a tiny guy. Yep. Okay, so at least we know Caulfield's in on both of them.
Right? You gotta love that Coffield's out there bullying guys his own size. That's just hilarious. So, like, I know that there's some people worried about Caulfield and the lack of goal scoring. I know 2 goals in the last few games here probably eases some of that stress, but I gotta tell people that if you're worried about Caulfield, I think you're worried about the wrong things. I know the goal scoring is fun, right? We all want Caulfield to score every game because it's super fun to see him get all happy and excited and the team to win games and stuff. But the improvement from his overall game is so strong, especially to do it away from Suzuki. And frankly, Suzuki has done the same thing with and without Cole Caulfield this year. His
Yeah.
defensive game is back to what we expected 2 years ago, right? When he was playing not high end minutes, but like secondary minutes behind Dano. So, as much as this season with Doc out, with all these injuries again, with a lot of players not scoring, it's a little bit depressing, and people are still low from not taking Mitchkov in the summer. And you can watch this team every game and be like, why the heck didn't they take the goal scorer? They need goals. The improvement among the most important players on this team in terms of going forward, the improvement of Suzuki, Caulfield, Slavkovsky, Gouli, those are like my big four this year that I'm watching. All four of them have taken huge strides. Don't talk about the first period for Gouli tonight
Yeah.
either. But outside of the first period for Gouli and Caulfield, huge strides. And that's what I'm hanging my hat on this year for the Montreal Canadiens in terms of what I'm watching for and what has gone really well. Because I look at this team is still really bad defensively, right?
Yeah.
You go on like your favorite stat site, whether it's Natural Stat Trick or if you pay for Evolving Hockey or whatever database, right? If you sort by like expected goals against and you look at the players' names that are among the worst, I would argue that of the bottom, I think it's like 7 or 8, none of them are going to be on this team in a couple of years.
Yeah. I mean, like I know Lindstrom statistically had a really good night. I saw this. I saw a peek at the scorecard after this, but like most nights, he doesn't really seem like much of an NHL option. Um, and you know, you talk about the Canadians needing, you know, that people think Canadians need star talent and passing on Michkov. I think their defensive cupboard right now is about as full as it probably should be. Like
Yes.
you've got Gouli. I don't know what Justin Barron projects to be. I don't know what Jonathan Kovacevic projects to be on this team. Jaden Struble has stepped in, and I don't think he's looked out of place once. There was the one play at the beginning of this game where he made a pinch on a play, and they ended up going back the other way on an odd man rush. But like generally, he makes a ton of high percentage plays that like I don't know if it's because he's sheltered on that third pairing, and I'd like to see more. But like all of those games have been road games. They can't really hide him that well. Um, Outside of him though, like still haven't seen Norlinder this year. He's been called up. He hasn't played. Reinbacher's on the way. Lane Hudson's on the way. Like the Canadians' blue line looks as fun as it has since PK was coming into the league. Like you know, like that's sort of the generational bar we have for defensemen in this with this franchise. So like I'm not I like you talk about those players who aren't going to be there. I don't know that Matheson's going to be there. I don't know. I really don't know what they think of him long term.
I like Matheson, but I think this season kind of exposes why he was traded,
Yeah.
right? He is a player who should probably be a 3 or 4 and be really great in that role. But in the spot that he's in with Montreal, he gets very exposed, and it's not pretty. Although I think he had a fantastic night tonight. I thought he was
Sure.
one of the Canadiens' best players tonight. Uh, but overall this season, it has been a struggle, especially on the defensive side, especially without the puck. Like he can win individual battles really well. I think he's strong and smart with his stick, but some of the risks that he takes, it's like, man, you got to know when you don't need to play 4D chess. Just play some checkers and
Yeah.
simplify it a little bit, and you'll probably be a little bit better off. But I understand that with the way this team plays, the way that Marty St. Louis wants them to play, he almost wants them to reach for the best play all the time, and because they're not as talented as their opposition, not as structured as their opposition. When that doesn't work, they get shredded and shredded fast. So
Yeah.
I do wonder if this current play style will translate to success eventually, but we won't really know until they have at least a medium caliber talent team out there. And I think the defense, like you said, is pretty solid. I don't think they should be drafting any defensemen going
Yeah.
forward. They've just got too many guys and too many high end guys who are looking to break into the NHL very shortly. So I want to see a point where the forward group is as stacked as the defense group, right? Where you're like, well, how is this guy going to ever make it? Because he's got to leapfrog 14 guys. That's
Yeah.
what I want to see from the forward group, and it to be like talented guys. Not to besmirch him, because I do genuinely love this guy, but not like a bunch of Michael Pezzettas who are clearly
Sure.
NHL caliber, but not high end guys.
Yeah. Or like, and that I love Joshua Waugh as well.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that we are already drawing a straight line from him in Laval to him in the top six is a bit of an issue. That right? Like there's no who does he have to leapfrog? Like I think they're
Yeah.
doing the right thing by keeping him in Laval. I hope he stays there all year. Maybe he gets a call up, gets his first NHL game, has a cool memory. But like I think they're doing the right thing by keeping him down there. At the same time, it's like who's he have like who's Gignac isn't going to make the team, guys. Like there's not really someone keeping him in Laval other than the Canadians artificially saying like, look, just stay there. You shouldn't be up here dealing with the game that they had in LA. It's probably not a good thing to have a Joshua Waugh involved in a game like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the tactic that they're taking with Joshua Waugh and Sean Farrell and all those young kids who are like new to Laval this year, it seems like they don't want to be put in a situation where they're calling up, because I saw a few people suggest, like, Monahan's struggling, bring up Joshua Waugh. I don't think they want to bring up Joshua Waugh and say, fix this situation. They want to bring Joshua Waugh up in a situation that's already working and say, hey, run free, young man, score a goal in the NHL, have fun, have seen every have make sure that you've seen everything that you can see in the American Hockey League, so you have the experience of failure, of success, of things not going well for you even when you're playing well, and have that ability to draw on those experiences already when you make the NHL. And frankly, it is kind of refreshing after the way this organization has been run for the previous 10-12 years. So that's good. I will transition a little bit because I want to get your thoughts on a little bit of a rant to end the show here, our last segment before we take questions from our amazing viewers who are in the chat having fun. I see MUFC says we clearly need an experienced assistant coach behind the bench. Stronger tactics must enter the fray now. I don't think now is necessarily the time, but I'm 100% with you that eventually there's going to be another shoe that drops, and they're going to need a real tactician behind the bench. Like that seems clear to me. How about you?
Yeah, I just like Stefan Robida, I think, has stepped in and done an admirable job with what the Canadians have put. Like last season, I think we often forget that the top six had four rookies in it at the start of the season, and most of them stayed
Yep.
there throughout the year. Like it's the the team that he was given, the defense core that he was given, like they should not have even been anywhere remotely as good as they were last year, and they still weren't even that good. Um, like it is what it is. I don't like we rant about Alex Burrows regularly, right? Like it's a point where like you're kind of wondering like what do you even do here? Like why are you like it, you're not the power play coach. You draw up the plays in the 6-on-5 situations that almost never work. I think they have like a 2% success rate. Like they just don't work. I don't really know what Trevor Letowski's doing back there. Like it seems like Hughes and Gorton took over and they had Marty St. Louis in mind, and they just like I think they obviously they were gonna let Ducharme play out the year and then figure out how a way to convince St. Louis to come to Montreal. They didn't really have to do that because he, came in the middle of the year, but they didn't want to, completely upset the apple cart and get rid of everybody else behind that bench. I just don't think that we've seen the results that justify keeping them. But at the same time, like, is it reasonable right now to can all of them? Like, I don't think that's fair either.
Yeah, it is weird because if you were to fire somebody now, you're like, what did we expect them to do? Right? Like, are we giving them the personnel to succeed? Are we giving them the mandate to even succeed? Like, is Josh Anderson on the power play every time he goes out there because Alex Burrows and Marty St. Louis are like, this guy is the best chance we have to score a goal out there. We're going to throw Josh Anderson out there and he's going to stand in the middle and just watch.
Direct
uh,
traffic.
like, yeah, I don't know. Or is it that they're just desperately trying to get this guy going and they're very patient with veterans, like we saw with Hoffman last year, with Dodonov before he was traded. It seems like they're just trying to get what they have to work and trying to throw everything at the wall to get there. So I don't know tactically if it's on the assistant coaches or not, but they do probably need somebody with experience around there, just because everybody on that coaching staff is relatively green to coaching.
Yeah.
Marty brings a lot of cool stuff to the table. I do think he's going to be the head coach for a very long time, but they probably do need somebody. I saw Jacques Martin was mentioned in the chat. I know people get their backs up about Jacques Martin, but somebody like that who is so smart tactically would be an addition to this team that would be really good. But one of the things that's been so frustrating about this team to watch this season has been their complete lack of defense off the rush. I believe they give up more chances off the rush than any team in the league, which is usually a death knell for teams when they try to be good, because that's just killer on goalies, on defensemen, on morale, on everything. But I'm going to take a different tack, Ian. I'm going to say the Montreal Canadiens are the only truly honorable team in the NHL because zone entry defense is bullshit. Because offsides are garbage. Offsides are terrible for this league. And I know that some people will say, oh, well, if you didn't have offsides, you have cherry picking. So what? If a team wants to cherry pick, that means they're willing to go down to 4 men in their own zone. They can take that risk. And the fact is, if defensive structure is using offside to defend, how are we saying that that's a good thing? Because if a team was using the rules of the game to defend, like, say, continually throwing the puck over the glass, well, the NHL made a rule specifically to stop teams doing that. Or icing the puck. Well, the NHL changed the rule so that you can't change now on an icing to stop teams from doing that. So I will say that the Canadiens being terrible at defending their own blue line is because they're an honorable team and they don't want to abuse the rules of the game to defend and actually want their players to do the defending and not force offsides. And either they need to get rid of offsides, or if a team forces an offside, they can't change their players. This is my hill, and I'm willing to die on it, Ian. Let's go.
So you had me. You had me that I was ready to run through a wall until you said, that it actually forces them to play defense, because then they actually don't do that. Like they forget
That's
that
true.
part.
That's true. They don't do that either.
Like
But it had to fit into the rant. I have to pretend that they're actually good at something.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, maybe if they figure that out, you've got me back on. I'll print t-shirts, we'll make it happen. But like it reminded me like when and I hate ripping on the guy because he hasn't played a game in a month, but David Savard. That guy loves skating backwards even when he's not supposed to be skating backwards. Like the
Skating
amount of
backwards on zone entries.
yeah, the amount of like space that the Canadians defense give the other team to operate is bad. Like the
It
gap
is
control
galling.
is bad. It's not at an NHL caliber. Even like the guys who should be better at it are not. So it's, I don't know. I hate offsides. I hate the offsides challenge. Every time tonight especially, every time a goal was scored, I wondered if it was going to be challenged for offsides because all of those zone entries look so close.
Yeah.
It's ruined the celebration of a goal to me. Like I can't just joyfully be like, oh cool, a goal, that was awesome. There's always, oh, there was a goal. Are they going to challenge? Like
Yeah.
that doesn't happen in other sports, right? Like when there's a home run in baseball, it's a home run. Like we celebrate that. The guy jogs around the bases for some reason. It's awesome. Like you don't see this in any other sport. The NHL just like insists that offsides is so incredibly important for some reason. Just in the same way that like the linesmen think it's super important for the puck to be dropped exactly right, even though that possession generally doesn't mean anything. So it's unless it's in overtime, like the 3-on-3 overtime face-off shenanigans has been driving me nuts lately. These, uh specialty players that come on for one face-off and then immediately leave the ice. It seems to be not taking 3-on-3 overtime at like the spirit of what it's supposed to be, but that's an entirely different rant.
Yeah, and offside reviews are kind of like a whole different thing, but I'm with you in that the NHL in instituting the offside challenge rule, like I don't mind if like getting the call right. You know what I mean? Like people are this is always the argument when an offside challenge happens. Like, well, getting the call right is good. Yeah, it is, but if it's been 30 seconds, I don't care, right? And like if you have an offside, like I think it has to be situational the way that they're looking at offsides because the Canadians have had several offside calls go against them this year on goals, and it's not about the Canadians or another team, whatever. But like, if somebody is just a hair ahead, and soccer has this issue too with VAR, uh, if somebody's just a hair ahead and it doesn't actually give them an advantage, really, who cares? Are we playing hockey or are we playing synchronized line crossing?
Right.
Right? And in creating this review system for offside in particular, making it so important to the game where like every team has a video crew watching every entry that leads to a goal, right? To like examine it from every angle, see if it can get called off. And yet we don't really have that kind of review for like a high stick that causes a turnover or a slash of the stick or a trip behind the net that causes a 2-on-1 in front of the net. Like all these things that are so much more important and immediately impactful on a goal don't have the opportunity of review, but offside does. Like I just don't understand the obsession from the NHL standpoint because at the same time, yes, you're relitigating these offsides and some offsides that weren't called get called. How many plays that are onside get called offside by linesmen who don't want to look like they missed it?
Yeah.
It's probably not a huge amount, but there are goals every season that are not scored because of an early offside call. And you
Yeah.
can't go back and review and take it back. So in my mind, unless you're going to go to fully off ice linesmen or like off ice officials and just one ref on the ice, and you have like a team of officials with a linesman or a ref on the ice with an earpiece in, so they can go back and forth and say like, hey, this was this. You can go in and correct things on the fly. I don't see how this is ever going to be at a point where it's functional, and that's
Yeah.
a huge problem.
Yeah, and I mean like to, to take that review concept and turn it into something we saw last night in the Maple Leafs game, the missed high stick at the end of the game. The Toronto Maple Leafs high sticked Florida. They didn't I think it was the other way. A Florida player high sticked a Toronto player. They didn't call it. They completely missed it. Players, holding his face, skating off the ice, he's bleeding. The refs get together and they review it. They say we are reviewing a double minor for high stick. Well, they never
Yep.
called a double minor for high stick. They didn't call a penalty. Why is it that with high sticking, we've created this entire review scenario when there isn't one for hooking? There isn't one for tripping. There isn't one for goalie interference as a penalty. There is one for goalie interference if the puck happens to go in. Like it's just so funny that the NHL like draws all of these really weird lines.
Yeah.
It was like I remember a few weeks ago, I thought I was losing my mind watching the end of that. I think it was the Vegas game where Gallagher got a penalty for hooking, and then the guy called it hooking, and then they skated to center and they said we're reviewing the play for a penalty. They reviewed it. They said the call on the ice stands, a double minor for high sticking. A penalty they did not call. So they just like the NHL just loves making it up. It's just guys being dudes just out there making stuff up. Like I just don't know. Like I hate the slippery slope of like, well, if we start doing one challenge, we have to do a whole bunch. But the NHL hasn't gone in that direction, right? Like we don't challenge every penalty, even though I
No.
think like they miss a lot, right? Like they've completely removed like the coaches getting just one challenge. Now like you just get a penalty if the league disagrees with you. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of silly how all of this is unfolded, and generally no one is happy with any of it. Like on average, your team is just as likely to get screwed over by one as they are to be benefited by one, which I guess, is where they say, well, it's fair because everyone's upset or everybody's happy, it doesn't matter. But I just don't see that there's a whole lot of like reason for a lot of this other than Matt Duchene went 20 feet off sides 4 years ago, and now we are all paying the consequences for it.
Goddamn Matt Duchene. And I think this is where, like, I get frustrated as well with the conversation. It's like, just because something ends up over 82 games or whatever being relatively fair doesn't mean it's good,
No.
right? Like, the officiating system in the NHL is just, it's not good. It needs to modernize. We went from one ref to two refs, like 20 years ago almost now. And that was a good decision, but now the game is faster, players are bigger, the ice isn't getting bigger, there's less space on the ice. You saw tonight at one point, I think it was Anderson, like tried to wire a puck in on a dump in, and a linesman had to like
He
duck
had
at
to
the last
duck.
minute.
I saw that.
Like that was, and it was close. It was
Yeah.
close to going right off his ear. And like I respect the amount of work that those guys put in. I don't think we talk enough about the brutal travel schedule of referees and linesmen. It is horrific how many games they have to work, how long they skate. They don't take
Yeah.
shifts, right? So I think developing a system where, number one, the rule book is called more closely, where rules are far more black and white and less vague, because the NHL loves in every possible way to make things as open to interpretation as possible so they can do whatever the hell they want when push comes to shove. We got to stop that. Be a serious league. Give the officials some actual off ice support, because either you trust and respect your officials or you don't. As much as I think that the officiating system is bad, I doubt that the officials working are all bad, right? They have differing opinions sometimes in the same game, and two different games get officiated by two different refs. But overall, I'm sure that they're like the best at it in the world because they're in the top league. So give them some support, give them some clarity, and let's see what we can work with from there. And also, end offsides, and Montreal Canadiens are the only honorable team. All right. Shall we get to some questions from the stream chat? I know one person was saying they're upset with me talking about offsides. I've been promoting it for 4 years. Listen, I have been promoting anti-offside propaganda for much more than 4 years, and I will never stop. From my cold dead hands, will you make me stop being against offside? All right, let's see if we got some questions here to answer. First of all, let's see. I don't. Okay. Adam Dreyer says, why not let him get a game for Lindstrom or Kovacevic? This is about Matthias Norlinder. I'm surprised he hasn't gotten the call to come in yet, honestly. I thought that he would in the California trip, but I mean, it's not. I know Lidstrom scored tonight and empty netter, but it's not like he's playing that well. He had an all right
No.
one tonight, but I believe his expected goals for differential heading into tonight was like 30%.
Yeah. I
So
mean,
try it
it's
out.
like they have a back-to-back. They're playing them again tomorrow night. It seems like a perfect opportunity to say, hey, Lidstrom, sit this one out. We want to get Norlinder in. Right? Like it just seems like it could work. Although coaches hate changing winning lineups, so who knows?
Yeah. Evan B mentions, except Tim Peel, he's bad. Yes, this is true.
Hmm.
Tim Peel, Game Over Montreal guest of 2 years ago, probably won't be back.
Yeah, can't
And,
imagine.
I mean, maybe if we had like a kid on that he could yell at, like you heard that story, right?
Oh yeah, it was brutal. It's unbelievable. And there's
Yeah.
the infighting at the publication that he has a podcast on is quite funny. It's incredible content.
Yes, it is fantastic content. Adam Firebear asks a non-Canadians question: is Patrick Laine an elite, great, good, or bad player? I actually love that question because I think you could ask 50 people that and get a pretty even keel of like each one being equally filled.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like the poll would be relatively even. I think Patrick Laine is a good player who was developed very poorly.
Yeah, I mean he's a shell of himself of what we saw when he was in Winnipeg when the Jets were really good, right? Like, man, it's kind of it's rough to see what happened, right? Like he just doesn't even look like he's having a good time. It
Yeah.
was just tough. Like he seemed like a real happy-go-lucky guy when he first broke into the league, and the league has very quickly beaten that out of him. Um, I generally wonder like how much longer he has in Winnipeg or in Columbus. Like it just doesn't seem like it's been a fit at all. They've been trying to play him at center. Like what are
Yeah,
they
it's
doing?
weird.
It's like it's very very odd. He definitely has. Yeah, I agree with the development because he hasn't showed up to be what we thought he would be when he was picked second overall. Um, then again, that draft is all kind of funny after the first pick. You had Line go
Yes.
second. You had Puljujärvi was supposed to go third, and then the Blue Jackets shocked everybody and took Dubois, and then from there a whole bunch of other stuff that didn't that would have happened had Dubois been available didn't unfold. So yeah, I think he's a good player. I think on a good night on a playoff team, he might even be teetering into great, but probably just good right now.
Yeah. Mark chimes in Patrick Laine is a bad elite player that can be good. That's about as accurate as it gets. Patrick Laine, you know what? The vibes that Patrick Laine gives me are like, could have been like Pavel Bure and is closer to Josh Anderson. And that sucks.
Yeah.
Like that really sucks for him and for Winnipeg who drafted him, but like it's kind of on Winnipeg. Like there could have been such a better player than we got for Patrick Laine, and he still flashes that skill sometimes, but overall, not even close to what he was supposed to be. Which it
Yeah.
never feels good when that happens. Let's see here. What else do we got? Evan B asks, does Cory Perry play another game in the NHL? I'm gonna go with no. Uh, Obviously we don't know exactly what happened, but there's more and more details coming out now about perhaps some alcohol being involved in some inappropriate behavior with a team employee. I don't know how bad it had to have been for things to escalate this quickly, considering other actions that have happened in the NHL and teams not moving. But I guess also the Blackhawks have, other events that they have not handled very well in mind, so they wanted to handle this quickly. But it's a really weird situation. I
Yeah.
know Corey Perry is on the ice very hated by opposing teams his whole career, by opposing fans his whole career. But watching him in Montreal, I gained so much respect for him as a player. And behind the scenes, he just seemed like such a good person. You never know,
Yeah.
with these guys, and it again sucks to be disappointed by players that you thought were like better people. But yeah, I think this is the end to what probably could have been a Hall of Fame career, and maybe now might not be, depending
Yeah.
on how many details come out.
Yeah, he was probably a fringe player. He wouldn't have been a first ballot guy,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
but like he's got a Hart Trophy, doesn't he? Or he has a Rocket.
Yes.
I think yeah, like he had the peak of Corey Perry's career was very high. Um, it's and he sort of reinvented himself in a way where he kind of played more of that bottom six kind of player. He's always had that mindset, but I think that the Blackhawks I think if that first rumor, which I won't go into detail of because I think everybody's heard it, um, I think if that first rumor hadn't gone out, we probably wouldn't have heard anything. I think the second that it implicated Connor Bedard, their franchise player, and put him in an uncomfortable situation,
They kind of had
they
to address it.
it forced their hand, right? Like I that's just the way that I've looked at it. I think once that rumor, you know, I won't say gained steam because it's obviously not true, and it
Yeah, and
obviously was never true.
I don't think anybody actually believed it because it was Hockey
No.
Insider. Like everyone was just joking about it, right? And the Blackhawks got super upset about it. But yeah, it's a weird situation. That's one of the weirdest things. The NHL has more scandals this year, I think, than I've ever seen in such a short time. It's like every week there's something new, and
And half of them the league does to themselves.
yeah,
Like,
that's the thing.
you
And
know,
they
like
sit there, and just like the Blackhawks did at first, it was like, we're not going to comment any further. We're not going to give you any details. And it's like, I'm sorry, guys, but you don't actually have the right to do that. You can't make big decisions as a public company who has consumers and say, well, we're not going to talk about it. Like, things are going to be known. There's going to be things known about the Shane Pinto investigation that the NHL doesn't want to talk about. I know, like, maybe there's NDAs signed. Frankly, I don't give a shit. Like, I
yeah.
don't give a shit about an NHL NDA. I feel like the NDA, unless it's protecting a victim of something, is one of the most overly abused legal documents in the world. It's like that
Yeah.
and the DMCA.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I mean it's and like you said, it's a consumer confidence issue with this Blackhawks franchise, right? Like we it is impossible to digest what is happening now in a vacuum. You can't do it. Like we've and the Blackhawks have lost any right for them to tell us we have to just take them at face value here.
Yep.
Like
As
and
has the NHL, frankly, with their stupid uh jersey bans and all this stuff, and like, oh yeah, we're gonna have inclusivity and diversity people, and then we're like, and we're not gonna allow Marc-Andre Fleury to
yeah,
wear a mask designed by a First Nations artist, which
yeah,
is like, you let Thomas Grice walk around with an SS on his mask for like 2 years, so like,
yeah,
are we just gonna pretend that this is how you've always been? Like, it's such weird and unexplainable garbage from the NHL. They just want everybody to be quiet and not talk about them anymore. And it's like,
yeah,
it's almost like they stimulate more conversation by trying to keep their hands out of it. But it's
yeah,
weird. There
yeah.
was a question here asking how bad would it have to be to deny a clear Hall of Fame resume. Sorry, not recipe. He's not food for Corey Perry from going into the Hall. I would say, uh, obviously, it's not the exact same, but look at Theoren Fleury. Theoren Fleury, his NHL career is very clearly Hall of Fame caliber. He'll
Yeah.
never get in.
Yeah. Or it's like Kurt Schilling in baseball, right?
Yep.
Like Kurt Schilling, he's probably got a Hall of Fame resume as a pitcher. He won the World Series with the Boston Red Sox. He had the bloody sock. It was a really cool thing. He's a complete dumbass and a
Yep.
monster of a human being. And it turns out when you have to have human beings vote on these things, they tend to have opinions that sneak in every once in a while. It's like it, on the other end of that, it's why a guy like Fleury is probably going to get in. Like he's probably a fringe guy. There are probably goalies who had better numbers than him, but one, he was always around the Stanley Cup in his career, and two, he's a real likable dude. People just
Yeah.
like Marc-Andre Fleury. They don't have a bad thing to say about
Yeah. And Trinka says it's not the Hockey Hall of good guys. Yeah, of course, but it is the Hockey Hall of were you friends with this guy? Which
facts.
is
Yeah.
why Marc Andre Fleury is probably going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Everybody loves the guy,
Yeah.
and why Theoren Fleury will never get in. Everybody hates him. And Corey Perry, I think before this, was one of the most well respected players in the NHL, like from hockey men circles. Now, I don't know. I don't know. I think it's really tough.
Yeah.
Other than that, Trizak and Romelli are debating who scores first, the Canadiens' 2024 first overall pick or Josh Anderson. I think it's going to be Josh Anderson, guys. I don't think he's going to go
You
too
don't
much
think
longer.
you don't think he's Scott Gomez is this, and we go even if he goes a full calendar year, we're still shy of the draft. So it would have to
Yeah.
be it would have to eclipse that, which was already pretty hilarious.
I mean,
Um,
Scott Gomez's shot was so bad. He may
One
as
just
well have
has to
played with.
hit him. Like one just
Yeah,
has to hit Anderson and go in soon, right? Like it has to hit him in the ass and the puck just goes in. You know, I hope he does it at home. I hope it happens in Montreal. The pop in that building will be unbelievable.
I kind of wanted him to do it tonight in Columbus because it's his old team, and maybe they
Same.
would like fire off the cannon just for him. Surprise everybody in the media lounge there and make them crap their pants. But that's it. There's a couple angry Blue Jackets fans in the chat asking, will the Blue Jackets ever win 50 games again? There was a question earlier from CBJ number one fan asking why the Columbus Blue Jackets continue to be a turd on the ice or something similar like that. I'm sorry, man. I know it's been a tough existence for the Blue Jackets.
Yeah,
They had
they
that stretch under like Torts where they were like this really tough team to play against, and they still have elements of that. But hey, you got Fantilli, you got David Juracek. Things are going probably to get better. They're probably going to get better. Maybe, I don't know.
yeah, I don't want to pour salt in this, but that's how I found out the Jackets had ever won 50 games. Was that have they won 50 games in a season? I
I have
feel
no
like that
idea.
can't be true. I feel like even the years they made the playoffs, they were a wild card team. But like that's not I'm just pouring salt in the wound. That's not fair. Um Kent Johnson, he's gonna be pretty good. That's
Yeah,
fun.
there's the guy that keep healthy scratching.
I
Kent Johnson.
know.
Kent
What is that?
Johnson.
It's so funny. Like the guy that they got rid of Babcock, and the guy that they replaced does a lot of the same stuff that Mike Babcock would do. Like, it's kind of I'm kind of wondering what's going on there. I can't imagine that they keep him around after this year, but we'll see.
Yeah, 100%. All right, folks. Thankfully, the game ended ahead of schedule today, so we got to start this early. Give you a nice long show with Ian, but I'm going to go to sleep. So thanks everyone for tuning in. It was a great show against after a decent game, somewhat decent game, except for the first period, as we keep saying. But I'll be right back talking to you guys, everyone, tomorrow because it's a back-to-back game, and then after that it'll be Mark for another week while my parents are in town visiting the kids, and then we'll see how things go because we're going into strikes for my kids' elementary school starting next Friday. So thanks, stupid CAC. That's a real name of our political party here in Quebec, by the way. I'm not just
Nice.
saying CAC.
Nice.
They're refusing to pay teachers and nurses and support staff and giving them raises even at inflation. They offered them a 10% raise over 5 years, I believe, which is significantly lower than inflation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's good times up here. I'm sure it's good times down south as well. But thanks, Ian, for joining me here. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. Thanks to our wonderful fan base that comes in every night and has a great amount of time, a great time in the chat, no matter how long we go. We really appreciate you. Ian, tell everyone where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm at maybe it's Ian on most places. Subscribe to the Build where you find podcasts. I try to do episodes weekly or bi-weekly. It's a good time.
Yeah, and Ramelli says all government employees. Well, not quite all government employees, Ramelli. The CAC government did vote to give themselves a huge raise, and Quebec politicians are now the highest paid in the country, even though Quebec is not, the highest grossing province or anything. So yes, they some government employees got raises, just not the ones
Sweet
that
gig.
actually do work.
Yeah, sweet gig. That sounds
Great
awesome.
gig.
Where do I sign up? My last name's French. I can make it.
That's the way to do it.